हाय दोस्तों, तो आज हम लोग आ चुके हैं मोटोरोला रेजर 40 अल्ट्रा के लॉन्च पर. वी हैव नचिकेत विद अस हु इज द एडिटर ऑफ आवर वेबसाइट GizBot.com and most importantly we have Mr. Ruben Castano from Motorola with us. He is the global head for customer experience and design. और भाई मोटो रेजर के डिजाइन की फिलॉसफी और इस फ्लिप फोन के कॉन्सेप्ट के बिहाइंड द सीन्स के बारे में आज हम लोग बात करने वाले हैं.
Hello, Moto.
My name is Ruben Castano. I'm the head of customer experience and design for Motorola. Been with the company 18 years.
Since you have a user experience background, my first question will be regarding that. So, when it comes to foldable phones, it's not just a different form factor, as in like physical, but it changes things from the UI perspective as well. The whole display paradigm changes, multiple screens and all that. So, Google has done a lot of work around it to integrate those UI elements to optimize foldable design. So, have you worked with Google, or have you gone on your own path to optimize the UI yourself, the Android folk?
In previous generations, the dual screen support, which is what you're referring to, was not completely there from Google, so we had to do some things on our own. With this latest generation, the dual screen support is completely there from Google. We did work closely with them to make sure some of the key applications rendered in the best possible way on this external screen that we selected for the Razr 40 Ultra. But other than that, we also saw that the screen is so large that a lot of applications already ran and rendered in a very good way on this size of screen.
Okay.
We did even more than that. I see this as a platform. This external screen or these dual screens are becoming a platform that now we need to take advantage of to bring more value to consumers.
Okay.
So for example, we partnered with Spotify and we developed with Spotify a custom panel where consumers now have access to a music panel to not only play music directly from the external screen, but to discover music.
Okay.
That was a very nice learning that we had working with the Spotify team, that actually the way consumers like to consume music today is to discover things through recommendations versus I curate my playlist and that's the only thing I will listen to.
It's a social thing now.
So we built that panel with Spotify with that knowledge in mind. It's about discovery of new music that potentially will be your future playlist versus your playlist, and that's all you have access to.
So, looking at foldable phones, Google is now a competitor in the sense that they have their own device. And at the same time, they also, have run the open source project where you get the SDK and all that. So, do you think there'll be a friction as such in terms of, getting the whole foldable thing implemented into Android? Because you need access to the SDK. You need access to those resources.
Mm-hmm. No, not at all. I mean, we are obviously partners from an Android ecosystem perspective with Google. For us, the important thing is to continue, again, to deliver value to the end user. We're part of Android. Android is an ecosystem. We're all here to grow the Android ecosystem. And this form factor, curious note, is one of the key form factors that actually attracts more users from iOS over back into Android. So again, it's about building the Android ecosystem. Of course, we will do it with our unique, innovative take as a Motorola brand through our Razr franchise.
Okay. So, Samsung and Google, they're for first gen foldable phones. Google is having issues right now with the durability. Samsung had during the first gen, but Razr kind of escaped that. So is it because of law of averages, not many units out, or did you do something interesting in terms of engineering and design?
Multiple things. Overall, Motorola has always been known for durability and quality. So when we decided to embark into making the Razr into a smartphone, we spent in that first generation a lot of time understanding the unique characteristics that a foldable smartphone needed to withstand and achieve. Part of that is the different layers that are required to build the internal screen, because it's not just a plastic OLED display, it's multiple layers that are created to build the final product, and the hinge system that supports the folding mechanism. So I think it's the result of that. It's ingrained in Motorola's DNA to have very good, robust build quality. And it's also ingrained in our DNA that when we do innovation and design, it's built to withstand daily use from consumers.
When you see, a lot of competitors are having issues with, foldable phones, even in public perception, it's seen as not as durable as a regular fixed screen. Now, it's like it's a matter of physics. So, do you see it more as a material science issue or an engineering/design issue? Because these things are made of polymers, and polymers tend to be soft, and since they're bending, you will have bending fatigue related failure modes. So, do you think there needs to be more development in terms of a material science aspect, where we can have polymers that are harder, resistant to scratches, resistant to puncture?
That will continue to evolve.
Okay.
From the first generation of Razr to this one now being the fourth one, we've made huge improvements in all those areas, including the amount of cycles that we certify the device to be open and closed by a user. In fact, we've almost doubled from our original family to where we are today in terms of cycles that we are claiming the device can withstand to be open and closed. And again, it's about our unique proprietary way of not only building the layers that we use to create the foldable screen, but also since Gen 1, we invented this teardrop shape that allows the device to close and be completely gapless when it's closed. So that zero gap hinge, the fact that then foreign objects will have a much harder time to come in because there's a zero gap here. All those factors come into play when it comes to durability and quality. It's a metal frame. It's a metal frame that in this latest generation also, as you can see, has no exposed hinge elements, completely integrated with minimal borders on the internal screen. So again, it's an evolution. It's a journey compared to the first generation to where we are today. And as we move forward, the device will continue to evolve and carry forward where we started and where we're going with this type of form factor.
Okay. So in terms of foldable devices, it's like a very interesting engineering paradigm. If you look at the history of engineering, you look at the Viking swords. The Vikings used to conquer the world because their swords they made of carbon steel, so they could bend, right? And they were better than the others. The Mongols, they had composite bows, so they could use them on horseback because they're small. And then closer back to more contemporary engineering, we have with the iPhones, they started using a foldable OLED display, and they bend it at the bottom to make a small chin, and that was like a huge design change. So, do you think we are at a point where foldable phones are the next paradigm, or do you think they'll be superseded by something like a augmented reality device, where the whole focus is to take the display away from you and have it wearable? How do you see the industry folk?
I mean, to answer your question with the last point you brought, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, all these technology swim lanes will be present in smartphones regardless of their form factor, whether they fold, whether they're traditional candy bar devices. With this form factor in particular, the way we see it at Motorola is that it is a form factor that is expected to grow. And that's the reason why we are launching not one device, but a family of devices, because the form factor needs to become more accessible to a broader set of consumers. And so that's why we have the Razr 40 Ultra and the Razr 40 positioned at very different price points, still delivering on all the essentials that a foldable smartphone needs to deliver on, while bringing a lot of innovation, especially on the Ultra series compared to the 40.
Because right now people see foldables as like kind of an exotic toy, like that is restricted to like the very high-end buyers. But I think bringing it down to the masses, around the 40,000 range, is where where it will start to proliferate.
Yeah, as a brand, we're very focused to make that a reality. We need to make the form factor more accessible. As you can see, both of these devices were built off the same platform. They share a lot of the engineering development. Well, this one is positioned at a lower price point. It actually, counterbalances the smaller external screen, which is still very functional, with a larger battery.
Right.
But it doesn't sacrifice any of those other premium features that consumers expect today, like wireless charging, like stereo speakers, and so on. So it's always a balance. But yes, the form factor in general of a flip phone, in our view, needs to become more accessible to a broader set of consumers. Why? The market is asking for that. Consumers are asking for that. There's a very big trend today happening with consumers, especially younger consumers, of actually acknowledging that they can't be consumed by technology. They want to spend less time looking down at their device and actually looking up and talking to another human being. And this, curiously, this foldable form factor, beyond being easy to carry and easy to hold in your hand, allows you to do a lot of that, because you can do things very quickly on a smaller external screen or on a larger one, to that matter. But once you're done, put it away and then enjoy the moment. Be back to what you were doing versus just face down on your device.
Back in 2018, when I used to rummage through a lot of patents, I saw pretty interesting technologies wherein foldable devices prototypes, they had they were using nickel titanium, which is a shape memory alloy. Some were experimenting with electrically actuated polymers. So basically phones that could assume shapes on their own. So do you think that is more in the science fiction territory, or will that happen in the near future?
We're constantly experimenting with similar materials like the one you're mentioning, with new form factors as well. Just this year at MWC, we announced the rollable form factor, which takes a plastic OLED display and instead of folding it, allows it to roll while solving very similar consumer needs as the foldable, meaning it's small, it's easy to carry, fits in my hand, but then magically when I need it as a consumer, it rolls to become a much larger screen. So I can't talk about future devices, as you can imagine, but we are constantly innovating and looking at new opportunities of it can't be design for the sake of design or innovation for the sake of innovation. It's how do we transform that into something that makes sense for consumers. And so while there's many experiments and new materials out there, the trick is selecting the right ones and putting the whole package together so it makes sense for a consumer.
Yeah, and it makes sense from a economic perspective as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, if the rumors are to be believed, these phones are pegged around for 40 and 60K mark. I'm sure you won't comment on that, but what kind of a price range are you targeting? I mean, are you targeting price as the main motivator to get the users away from your competitors, or is it design or some other aspect? Is it a combination of all?
Our expectation is to first and foremost captivate consumers through innovation, design, materials, finishes, and experiences. The wow factor can come through, after understanding all that, seeing that the price is also quite surprising. But price should not be our prime motivation for these form factors, and it isn't. If we're only price driven, I think it's a very narrow focused approach, and honestly our competitors can maybe match that very easily, while it's not so easy to match innovation, design, fashion. So that's our primary focus. And yeah, we won't overlook the price aspect as well, but it's not our primary drive.
Coming back to the specifications, since this phone is using the 8 Plus Gen 1, compared to the Gen 2, it is a more power hungry device. And the unique form factor of this means that you have to use smaller batteries. So how are you going to compensate for that? Because it's like a mutually exclusive thing where a more power hungry device is being paired with a relatively smaller battery.
Right. Actually, with the Razr 40 Ultra, we increased the battery significantly from the previous generation. And we went even further with the Razr 40, thanks to the smaller display. With these type of form factors, it's all about space. Space is probably the most critical thing on a foldable device. Everything has to be duplicated. 2 batteries, 2 PCBs, a lot of cables running between the base and the flip to, allow things to talk to each other. So, as miniaturization keeps evolving, as components keep evolving, I think we'll be able to continue to grow on those vectors, like battery, like bigger speaker chambers and so on, without making the form factor necessarily bigger. And we're quite satisfied with the battery capacity that we've achieved on the Razr 40 Ultra. The fact that you can do a lot with the device closed actually goes a long way in terms of the amount of battery that a consumer will have at the end of the day.
The recent changes in India, they have kind of driven the Chinese manufacturers away. The government is clamping down big time on them. At the same time, we saw Motorola really taking up the slack and putting in excellent products, excellent software support, right? So, do you think how do you think the next year will look for Motorola, given this? Because Xiaomi has so slowed down the rest of the Chinese competitors have slowed down. So in terms of will you be bringing more products into the market to compensate for that, to fill up the vacuum? What's the strategy?
Our strategy is to continue to grow in the Indian market. It's based on multiple set of pillars. One of them is something that we started even last year, which is to grow our Edge and Razr franchises. You saw a recent announcement from us, the Edge 40, recently announced, very successful product in the Indian market. Today we're announcing the new Razr family, not product, but family of products. So again, I'm just focusing on that premium pillar. But there's multiple places that we will be addressing across our entire portfolio, not only on hardware, but also on software and services to continue our growth trajectory in the Indian market.
One of the main criteria for the Indian government is, they want brands to increase their local manufacturing.
Yes.
So do you see that as being feasible?
Do I see?
Manufacturing, most of it in India. Is it feasible?
Well, we already do local manufacturing in India. We have also started to source locally some components for devices. So I think that trend will continue. But yes, local manufacturing is quite important for us. We're very proud of that. And we're not only manufacturing for the Indian market, but we're also manufacturing from India for some other markets across the world.
But the whole term manufacturing in the media, it's kind of like, because when it comes to your inductors, your MOSFETs, and the actual raw materials, they are generally made by very, very few countries. China is the major supplier. So, do you still get the raw materials from there and then assemble it here, or do you do like a complete vertical integration here?
Like I said, some components like batteries is a great example, are locally sourced, chargers as well. Other components are still being, are part of our global supply chain, and then they're brought to India and assembled here. But once we have local manufacturing capabilities, the intent is obviously to do more and more locally.
Okay. You see, the Chinese do a lot of very weird manufacturing practices. They'll do like very small scale 3D printing. They will do certain concepts which are like made using very exotic 5-axis, 6-axis CNC milling. So we don't see a lot of manufacturers which aren't Chinese go into these kind of territories, making packs that are like pretty dazzling and all that. The crazy kind of designs. So why is that so?
Why we don't see other manufacturers copying that or doing that?
No, not copying that. When it comes to manufacturing, most Western manufacturers tend to be pretty streamlined. They optimize the design for manufacturing. But when it comes to these limited edition phones and all that, you see OnePlus, Oppo, and BPK Group mostly do a lot of that. So why is that so?
Well, I obviously can't comment on the strategies our competitors are taking. I can comment about Motorola specifically. Colors, materials, and finishes. We have a strategic partnership with Pantone, which goes beyond just selecting colors that we know are going to be fashionable and trendy in the market. The work that our designers do together with Pantone designers is actually curate a very specific palette that makes sense for us as a brand, that makes sense for the consumer electronics and specifically for the mobile phone segment. And then there's a lot of work that goes into selecting the right materials that bring to life that color. So you see, these are great examples. Vegan leather, very nice material, very tactile. Consumer feedback is actually, well, I don't need a case anymore, right? This device feels like it's not going to slip away from my hand. I love the way it feels. I'm not going to put a case on it. So that will be our approach as Motorola. Continue to leverage our strategic partnership with Pantone, continue to innovate on materials that provide satisfaction, enjoyment, and just deliver that expected wow factor to consumers. But not wow for the sake of wow. Like I said, vegan leather is a great example of that. It's beautiful to see, it's beautiful to touch, feels great in my hand, gives the idea that it's actually durable, which it is. It's actually an eco-friendly material as well. So we're addressing multiple touch points that are key for consumers. But it all has to make sense. It's not just for the sake of showing something because we can do it. That's not Motorola's way of doing products.
Basically, for function over form.
Form follows function. What makes sense for consumers? What actually brings value? bells and whistles, things that have a short lifespan in consumers' minds. That's not our way of doing design, hardware or software.
I mean, when we speak about flip phones, everybody just remembers the Razr. That's all the questions I have. Thank you so much
Right.
for your time.
Thank you very much.